going back to Bernie's question, because I've looked through the rest of the slides and there wasn't really one where it fits, so.
So, Bernie, your question was about can we set targeted rates for projects that are where a specific part of the community should pay or could pay? The answer is yes. So we're not, as part of this LTP, we're not planning on doing a rate review, but that does not mean to say we can't set a targeted rate if we think that that is the best way to pay for something. It is simply a matter of consulting on it, and a reasonably straightforward job to do. But the council would have to decide to propose putting that that rate in place. So yeah, absolutely, it is an option open to us, as is using development contributions to partially fund growth projects. You know, there are a few instruments that we can use through the Local Government Rating Act and the Local Government Act. So yes.
Except for our water meters, which arguably is a targeted rate, when was the last time, and I don't know the answer, it's not a rhetorical question, when was our last targeted rate? Because haven't we stripped all our targeted rates out?
Don't think so.
Economic development for businesses.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with your rating system yet.
But presumably we'll have a rating system workshop at some point as part of this process.
Yep.
I'm sure all our questions shall be answered.
Yes, and we'll make sure to give you a quick overview of the constituent parts of our rating system. Where I came from in the far north, we had like what felt like dozens of targeted rates, yet some councils hardly have any. Some have a universal annual general charge, some don't. You know, it's an act that has got quite wide powers. Yep.
Good. Okay, we'll carry on.
Right. Okay. So, I wanted to take you to the part of the slides where we start talking about the environment in which we're developing this LTP, because I think it's really, really critical. And as I mentioned earlier, the chatter amongst councils is that this is going to be a really challenging LTP. We have high inflation, increased depreciation from asset revaluations. Every year we revalue all of our assets and the depreciation value goes up and up and up. Plus the depreciation for assets that we built in the previous year. Really high labour costs. And so with just those adjustments made, it's highly likely that we'll have already exceeded the 7.8% rate increase that we agreed in the annual plan. So that's an issue because it doesn't leave us with any headroom to do anything else. So that's why it's going to be challenging. We're going to have to make some hard calls, I think. I've just put a little general rule of thumb up there to help you to put some context around adding money to budgets. So as you all know, we strike our rates based on how much money we need to operate the organisation. That's operating expenses, including including interest and depreciation. For every $900,000 of OPEX that we add, we increase our rates or the amount that we need to take through rates by about 1%. 0.5% is 450, 0.1% is 90,000, and for us to make any real difference to OPEX through CAPEX, we would need to remove $30 to $32 million to remove 1%, because the 1% is only depreciation and interest. So that gives you some kind of, and we'll keep reminding you as we go through our financial conversations about that that's how you can put some context. And often when we deliberate on feedback from the community, next year when we're putting the LTP to bed, we'll put up a model that says if you want to add this $50,000 and this $50,000 and that $100,000, this is the increase that we're looking at. So it helps you to get a bit of context.
Can I just ask a question, please?
Yes.
So,
Shelley, turn your microphone on.
I was just over there. So when we lose Three Waters,
Mhm.
people are going to expect a drop in rates and a drop in their rates bill because we're not now covering services. How are we going to put that information out to people around the potential that it might drop, but actually we've increased our costs? You know, everything else is increasing, so we may not go down by what they think because they don't have the level of understanding.
Mm.
that
That's
we
going to be a delicate piece of writing, and we're going to have to be very clear about the messaging in that, because the reality is that water still needs to be paid for, and ratepayers will still have to dig into their pocket to pay for the Three Waters, but it depends on how the entity decides to charge. If it's targeted, as it is in the far north, like I can see that the far north would have get quite a bit of relief, because I can't see the entity doing it on a targeted basis because it's not affordable. It makes it more affordable if you spread the cost across a lot more ratepayers. So there will be some changes, but it's going to be nigh on impossible to make much in the way of assumptions as to how much that change is going to be until we really know how they're going to cover their costs, how the entity is going to cover them.
We're going to have to message that in a real layman's term.
Oh, yes.
And it's going to have to be real simple, because
Yes.
otherwise everyone's going to say, but you said
Yeah.
you know, you've sold, you've got all this money for our assets, and now you're still charging us this much.
Yeah.
And then we're still paying that much.
Yeah.
So the water, so is the water entity going to charge in our rates, or was that the 2-year process?
We
where
don't
it
know.
moves
We don't know yet.
because that'll cause.
Yeah. So if you think about, so we have, as Sean was saying before, we've done a bit of modelling around what the impact of Three Waters, and it's like it's push me, pull you all over the place, but the overall effect is looking okay, right? So I think it's a matter of judging where, so there'll be some netting off of costs that in the end might end, ratepayers may end up better off. But we haven't got far enough down that. We haven't got enough of the answers yet to be able to really give you that with any kind of certainty. But you're right, the messaging is going to have to be carefully written, very carefully.
I think there's going to be a lead into it.
So I think Sean has a comment to make.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we know as a minimum the first 2 years we will be recovering the rates, or recovering the cost associated with the new entity. So it'll be council that delivers that as part of its rating process, and then either through some sort of contractual arrangement will provide that funding to the new entity. So and as a minimum, I'd say 2 years. I think the legislation they actually put through has specific requirements in there, and allows us to capture those costs and then provide them back to the entity. The other issue there is we have, as a council, always said that we didn't believe that the community would be better off through this process in terms of cost. And I think in all of our submissions we put through the Castalia work we did in terms of the economic implications, we highlighted a whole lot of problems in terms of the government's forecasting costs, and believe that a better model would see ratepayers with the assets left here would be similar, if not better off, in terms of if they didn't make those changes. That was when they had 4 entities, when they were able to spread the costs across a much wider catchment. Now they've got 10. Again, you'd have to suggest that those numbers are even more potentially skewed. But yeah, in the first couple of years, in terms of messaging, it will be extremely difficult, because it will be part of our rating process to recover that cost. So yeah, we'll have to have a look at how we do that.
Definitely. Good mentioning though.
And
Thank you.
Nigel?
Yeah, just on the new water entity, it's just a question about how much control, if any, council will continue to have. So, for instance, we have 2 significant areas that don't have fluoride in their water here in Kapiti, and 2 that do. So that decision has previously been made by the council. Presumably, does council then cede that authority completely to a new
I
entity?
think we might be getting a little off track.
Well, no, it's the question is around that's a specific, but in terms of the broader principle of what control council does have and what control it doesn't have, and then who's paying for it.
Can we include that in our FAQ info sheet, a little statement about
Yeah.
that? Thanks. Frank, did you want to ask something?
If we've already gone over our budget for the long-term plan, I'm just wondering if there's a communication strategy to start socialising the background and reasoning so that the public starts to get a feel that there are things impacting on our finances.
Chris, would that be a question for you, or Janice?
I'm happy to have a go. I think I mentioned earlier that we do annually discuss how we're going and how we're progressing, and I do believe that we have been reporting on how things have gone. I think that the messaging, even the discussion we're having here today about affordability and acknowledging we're in recessionary conditions, all the conversations we had about the annual plan previously with Mark de Haast in this very room actually, and the discussions around the annual plan talked about that, the tough times around the fact that we are, for want of better words, squeezing the lemon as much as we can, and that we do have areas where we've had to work really hard to make sure that we're not doing more than we need to. We have talked about the fact that even for the last annual plan, getting through on what was just around a 7% rates increase was just keeping the lights on from our perspective. So that position has not changed. For us to continue to deliver at our current rate, the current service levels, what we consider, well, some of us talk about as just BAU, is at that level. So I think we have started that conversation. I think it's something that we'll have to continue to talk about because essentially in the current recessionary conditions, it is costing us more to do just what we normally do. And we have talked about that a lot. And the business cases of any projects coming through, we're talking about that a lot. So I might hand over to Janice as well. No, you don't want to? I feel like we have been positioning that. It just may be that as we start to go around the long-term plan, that we need to make sure that we continue with that conversation. And maybe the balance that we were talking about earlier about affordability and long lists of wish lists of things and affordability, I think we need to be clearer when we head out of the space that we're in now. Sean's going to add to that.
So that Infometrics, so there's maybe it's how we look to extract some of that information that we've done in terms of the current position with the that 20% increase in terms of transport costs. There's a significant piece of work that's been done. That there's I think there's a couple of slides that Cheryl's got here that maybe we could use some of that in the engagement hub. Gives a little bit of context around that wider economic position that we're currently in, and as a lead into the further consultation.
Yeah. I think it would be fair to say that every council in the land starts their budgeting out like we plan to, which is add everything that we know, get scared, and then apply our minds to how we might be able to rephase things, move things around, maybe change some scopes, have some tough discussions to see if we can, beat that down to a more affordable kind of rate. So before we even come to you with an initial position, SLT will have been through several hours of very tough discussions about what we can actually do to bring things down a little bit. So, yeah, just saying that we're already with those changes, those things that we know we'll have already exceeded the current rate increase doesn't mean to say that we will tolerate it being there. you know, that there is going to be some trade-offs and prioritisations. And the other thing that you've got up your sleeve this time is your priorities. They're a good litmus to, you know, to help you in your conversations.
So just Frank's just going to come back and ask a follow-up.
Thank you. So, I don't doubt you're doing a fantastic job, but I'm happy to know that you've satisfied yourselves that this conversation has been socialised outside this room, and that you've started. So, if you're happy with that, if you're satisfied with that, then that's fine.
I think, Frank, this will be an important conversation to continue. So I guess what I'm signalling is I don't think this is the beginning of socialising this conversation. I just think it's critical that we continue to remind people that we have been talking about it. So the fact that we're not alone, I think, is very important. But also, I did mention earlier that Kathy had said to me before we started today that some people have been saying to her, oh, you know, times are tough. Actually, personally, I'm struggling. I'm struggling with rent, with food, with a bunch of stuff. And I think that's really important context that we're operating in, because I think the whole platform and what I believe we are operating in recessionary conditions means that we are in that land. And so that's where those tough conversations and choices do come onto the table. And so whilst I acknowledge that we do need the long list of what the aspiration options are, I think there's a conversation about the timing of things and how it aligns to priorities, and actually being able to say that there are choices to not do things if that's the environment and the context that you're operating in. But also, though, that in a long-term zone, not doing some things can have bigger impacts to the future. So it's just making sure that we've got the right information on the table to help an informed decision about what we do. And maybe what I'm putting on the table is, I know that it's likely that there's an aspiration to reduce rates as low as we can go, and I totally get that, but it's understanding the implication of that as well. So I'm just putting on the table that we've said to everyone, the 7% we landed for the last year of the annual plan kept the lights on. So lower than that, you're starting to turn stuff off. So
I think there's two tests here. So one test is to satisfy ourselves. If we've satisfied ourselves, that's fine. The other test is the front page of the Post test. How would those numbers look on the front page of the Post? And the acceleration of communications is a mitigation to the effect that might have on our community. That's the only reason I'm raising it.
I think it's a very valuable thing to raise. And earlier in the briefing, I did ask when we were going whether we had a slide on communications, and there's presumably we're going to talk about that soon in another workshop. But something we need to really put our thinking hats on about now. So thanks for the question, Frank. Martin.
Yeah, sorry, I'm going to upset a couple of people here. So when we did the annual plan, the long-term plan, 3 years ago, it was a bit of a mystery for us, wasn't it, Sophie? And that sort of stuff. And we got to the stage where we realised it was a bit too late to actually do anything effective in it, other than just nod our heads and go, damn. But we were told in no uncertain terms that we were going through growth, and that these larger rates increases would be for 3 years and then they'll drop down. And that was one of the reasons, okay, that's fine. So we've had a rate increase of about 30% over the last, when it's compounded, over the last 3 years as such. That's significant. Now, don't get me wrong, I appreciate the cost pressures, I really do. And my thing that I've been on about for a little while now is that rates, in my opinion, are maxed out. We can't keep pushing that barrow. So my first question is, what are we going to be doing pre-election through Local Government New Zealand with regards to putting the thumb screws on central government with regards to funding or promises of funding in regards to whoever's in the next government? Are we going to be doing anything? Are we going to be pushing Sam to maybe push that question a bit harder with local government? Because we need to get... We had Chris Luxton talk about $1 billion slush fund for councils, more than likely, you know, whether we get put in place or not. But we need something, I personally think, we need to be trying to get something firm out of them with regards to sharing some of that cost burden for our infrastructure. And I don't know what that looks like. I really don't. And that sort of stuff. But my concern is if if those questions aren't put to central government pre-election, we can kiss it off for another 3 years. Potentially. So that's my first thing. I appreciate that, yeah, we might have to be switching some lights off, but I struggled to get my head around how councils worked with regards to doing their costings. And thank you, Cheryl, with regards to saying, look, we put it all in the pot and we try to drag it back. But a standard business case would be to actually go, well, hang on, this is the money we've got coming in, let's factor in our growth and other bits and pieces, which we do. And then what's our community going to wear? And this isn't just saying, oh, we're trying to keep the rates low just for political reasons or anything like that. I think this is way past that. And let's just say, and I'm just spitballing here, we go 3%. That's the increase, right? We've got to make things work within that. Now, I know with the cost pressures that we've got, that gets ugly, that gets horrible, and that sort of stuff. But I would be remiss if I didn't talk to this, because I felt like I didn't represent the community's view in this regard during the last long-term plan process and that sort of stuff. Now, Liz, I know what you're saying. You got to spend with regards to things. I do get that as well, but there's that balance. You know, there's not a heck of a lot of tax relief going on at the moment, even by what's been currently proposed. That sort of stuff. I'm just very, very worried around what we're asking our ratepayers to cough up for again. I was talking to a chap just the other day, his rates went from 6,000 to 7,000 this hit. And I was just talking to a lady across the road whose rent's gone up to more than her pension, and that sort of stuff. And this is real world stuff. And if we've got to cut our cloth, maybe we have to cut our cloth. And I know the other side to this coin is that through all the reform that's going on, we really don't know what the heck things are going to look like in October as well. So I'd be really keen to visit that rate figure there after we know who's in government. But what I'd like to also know is are we going to be putting the hard word on our local MPs in a structured way with a defined answer out of them as such, or not? Because to me that's something we need to be pushing a bit harder if we're looking to try and do the things that we need to do.
Yeah, so that's a political discussion. I've just booked in a councillor only time for next week, so let's put that on the agenda. Thanks, Martin. Nigel?
Yeah, just in terms of the usual approach here with LTPs and long-term plans and annual plans is that you get this suite of things that you want to do and you go, here's the amount of money we've got, and so you have to chop some stuff, right? And if you look at the people who have profited enormously from Kapiti in the last decade or two, developers, they have got off really, really cheap, in my view. So rather than necessarily looking about what gets chopped, there's a constant lamentation around this table about lack of income sources for council. That is actually one of them. Plan Change 2, which is going to make a monkey of all of this stuff anyway, this is going to be nirvana for developers, and council needs to, in my opinion, make sure that developers are paying a premium for being here, and we really need to think about that. We need to think about those numbers. And the other observation is, and this is not really the time for it, but I personally think I could drive a truck through the assumptions that Infometrics are making, and no doubt you've had, there's an interesting discussions, right? But if Infometrics are slightly out, then we are a long way out, and so I think that's perhaps another discussion for another time. But yeah, we really need to think about how do we maximise developer contribution. In the past, what we've heard, the mantra is, no, you can't do that, because if you do that, they won't come here, which is just like, that's nonsense, and it's never been true. It's just been it's been a threat that's been used to keep developer contributions to the minimum. Anyway.
I just want to counter that, because if we slap up the cost for property developers, guess what they do? No, it just becomes another cost to their building, and the people buying the houses pay for it. But
Or else they go to the Hora Whenua.
yeah, but the other thing is, I think coming back to that point before about, we need to get leverage, and and the EDKB is looking at doing that, and we're looking at doing it with housing as well. Let's look at ways we can get leverage by tapping into other funding sources, as opposed to imposing costs and penalties and all that sort of thing. Let's work in partnership with other organisations to get things done here. We don't have to do it all ourselves. And I've said that ever since I've started ever speaking in this chamber years ago, wearing other hats, that's what it's all about. It's working with the community to find ways, using not just money but also volunteer time and effort. There's lots of resources out there in our community that we're just not using efficiently.
Frank?
So I just want to say, socially, your community needs housing. Māori need housing. Māori want to increase their housing. Increasing costs to developments would mean increasing costs to the parts of the community that need housing. We met here, was it 2 days ago, on the business development group. The business development group, with no exception, were of the opinion that we needed more housing, more people, and we need to grow our area in order to grow business in Kapiti. We can't do that without developing and having homes for those people. So that's just another perspective to consider.
On that basis, you'd cut the development there, couldn't you?
Sorry, is it Chris who's got the next?
Sorry, I just want to note that we are going to be having a dedicated session to development contribution policy, and actually just what Frank's talking about. And I think part of what we'd like to put on the table is to share how Kapiti stacks up against other districts. So we're going to be able to come back. We've deferred the session slightly because we're going to be talking to a group of people from across the North Island around what they're doing, but also to make sure that we're incentivising the things in this district that are important to us. So when we talk about development contributions, it doesn't have to be a general thing that we're saying we're going to put things up. I think it's just important that we focus on the right things, and we're making sure that we are thinking of the intergenerational balance for growth and who pays as well. So those are some of the things we're going to be talking to you about before we think about what does that mean right now. We're going to put some options on the table. We want to get your thoughts, and that is something that we also want to talk to the community about as we move forward. So this is a really important space. That's what I wanted to make sure I put on the table.
So, thank you, Frank.
Thanks, Frank.
Thanks for your input today. It's been great. So distilling that down, this is important, and we're going to have a briefing. Great. So we're ready to move on.
Yep. Let's get you guys out of here soon. The Infometrics Outlook. So that report that I circulated with these slides was commissioned by all of the councils, or many councils in New Zealand, for Infometrics to have a look at cost escalations and what has actually happened and what the outlook is. So this is by no means to neutralise any kind of inflationary guidance that we get from Burl, which is still our credible source of information indexing. But this is just to get a different kind of take from Infometrics on what looks to be happening out there. And so this slide here is all about just some of the sound bites that I read in that report, that there's going to be a bit of a recessionary feel until mid-2024. And that the big cost increases that we've been experiencing are less dramatic now than they were at the end of last year, but we're still feeling the impact of that. Infometrics believe we're now at the worst of the inflation spike, and there's a general expectation that it'll level off to mid-2024. They also say that further interest hikes are unlikely, but I just read this morning the Reserve Bank has upgraded its peak OCR rate from 5.5 to 5.59, which would indicate one further adjustment. It seems that they're saying that, you know, to be able to keep check on inflation, they need one more small adjustment. So we'll keep a watching brief on all of this. They also say that business concerns seem to be shifting to weakened demand as people spend less, and that households in general will continue to feel the pinch over the next 1 to 2 years. Strong signs costing and pricing environment will be more normal by 2025, and that doesn't mean that the prices are going to drop back to what they were. They'll just stop increasing.
You don't take that as a guarantee, Councillor.
Yes, don't take it as. So this is what I was trying to do today, was just to give you a, if you're all not already aware of it, and I'm sure you all are, but just some kind of reality check as to the environment that certainly the first half of the 10 years of this LTP we're going to have to be extremely prudent in our financial decision making. I've just put a few of these slides up here about showing what the cost escalations are, and if you read the document, you'll see that all of these cost escalations seem to have the same profile: a sharp uptake at the end of 2022, and then this nice little curve that goes down towards the end of the next, around about 2027, 28. And so this first one here is the local government inputs, which is your non-infrastructure type of things. That's your cost pressures. You can see it's got a similar profile there. Transport infrastructure, again, pretty similar. And Three Waters, which will not be ours to deal with in later times, but it certainly still will be ratepayers to pay for. So it's going to continue to have an effect. So I just thought I'd put those 4 slides
We'll
up there.
be sending them the bill potentially.
Yes, yeah. So just to highlight the fact that you've got that profile that looks like that. And while we might be tempted to load up the latter part of the LTP, there's always a bit of risk in creating a bit of a bow wave, because you don't know what's going to happen in the intervening years. So prudence. Can't say that word enough.
So can I just ask a question in relation to labour costs?
Hang on, Nigel, just wait for your microphone.
So I just wanted to ask a question in relation to the graph on labour costs. Given that we're in a relatively low-wage economy already, and inside local government, there are enormous pressures. This council is a good example of, having to compete in a very competitive market, and I can't really see how that competitive market is going to drop away, and I'm not quite sure what the predicate for that is. So I don't know where the information comes that suggests that in fact by 2035, labour costs are going to be what they were in 2011 relative presumably to everything else. So I don't understand that.
I agree, I don't understand that either.
Yeah, the opposite would seem to be true. Yeah, I know, but it would seem to be counterintuitive to what's actually happening. But anyway.
I agree with you that there's probably a bit more conversation that could be had around that. I don't know the answer because I'm not an economist. I like to pretend I am, but no, I'm not.
I think the important thing here, though, is that when our LTP kicks in, which isn't until middle of next year, isn't it? That we'll actually be heading into a period where things are improving.
Starting to, yes. Not
getting worse. So the load will be getting lighter on most people by the time it comes to fruition.
So I think our reality is that we'll be developing this LTP in some very uncertain times. Current capacity of the organisation is really stretched. We're carrying quite a few vacancies, that'd be correct, Darren? We have significant budget constraints, as we said. It's actually costing us a lot more just to stand still. We have uncertain timing of the transition for affordable waters, which is not so much a cost issue, but it's we have to have a plan B. We're doing a lot of paddling underwater, getting everything ready to go on that. Hopefully, given now that amendment bill has just gone through the House, there might be a bit more action on that soon. We might have a bit more certainty. We continue, of course, to have climate change issues, rising sea levels, hotter temperatures, more frequent wet weather events, cyclones, tornadoes. The RMA reform timing is unclear at the time that I wrote this slide. It's unclear. It's, again, the Regional Spatial Planning Act and the Natural Built Environment Acts both went through the House this week, and in the next week I expect to get some advice from Taitawara on what sort of assumptions for us to put in place. The implications of that are that if we have to contribute, we will have to contribute financially to these regional plans, and it means that we will have to put some money in our budgets, or clear some room in our budgets for them. We do, of course, have the upcoming general election, as we mentioned before, Three Waters, but also policy change, most potentially around roading, perhaps. Future for local government review, we know it's going to reshape our sector, but we don't know how and when. The current advice I'm getting from Taitawara is that it's not relevant to this LTP at this stage. There's not enough known about where it may or may not go. So, as I've said before, prudent budgeting, particularly in the first 3 years, we need to assume that households will continue to feel the pinch, and that economic conditions may be more favourable in outer years. We will confirm that. Burl always come back to us with their inflationary outlooks around September, October. So we will be doing a session on that and confirming. It's not an exact science, but it's the best that we can get, So, and I certainly plan on keeping an eye on the economy as we go through, have these conversations. There seem to be lots of different stories out there. You hear a good news story 1 minute, and the next minute it's all doom and gloom again. Not quite sure what to believe, but certainly if we plan from a prudence perspective, I think that's a good approach.
I think you'll like this slide, Martin. I think you'll like this slide.
So this is where we let the financial strategy lead us. Like I said, we're already doing some work on what that financial strategy is going to look like, because it's got a lot of transitional points in a lot of different income and expenditure areas. So more than so in the past, that financial strategy has to lead us in what we can do. We will need to accommodate the warnings that Standard & Poor's have given us. So there's, like I mentioned before, probably a little bit of haircutting. They're going to want to see that prudence flowing through. Balancing the needs of assets, upgrades and new projects, preferably only happening when we can afford them. And fitting into the financial envelope. Affordable waters, our working assumption at the moment is that we will transition any time between the 1st of October 2024 and the 1st of July 2026. So we're modelling and financially planning for the first 2 years that we will assume that we continue to make decisions and be responsible for those assets for the first 2 years of the LTP. The government has already signalled that we won't have to do anything drastic if that time frame is changed. We will simply adjust in the next annual plan. We will not have to do amended LTPs, which will save our ratepayers a lot of money. So we're going to do OPEX and CAPEX for years 1 and 2. When I say nothing beyond CAPEX, we will have to do CAPEX beyond because we're contributing to a Entity G asset management plan and that information will be required, but we've already got that. Growth projects identified for 20 years to support the development contributions policy. Financial strategy will show the divestment of assets at the 1st of July 2026. And the infrastructure strategy won't include significant decisions on Three Waters. If you think about an infrastructure strategy, that's what it's all about. What are the significant decisions that we will make? We won't be making those decisions. We won't be silent on Three Waters. We'll have to talk through the story of transition, but we won't be listing any major pieces of work that we'll have to make decisions on. Oh, I just went back, sorry. Future for local government, like I said before, that's unknown, so we'll ignore that for now. And the RMA will keep a watching brief. I hope to know next week what that's going to be. So I think we've got our last slide. So any questions before we start discussing this? We had SLT sit around and come up with some principles that they thought might be good ones to stick to when they're reviewing budgets. Yep.
Just a question, just because I haven't wound Liz up enough, so this might help. The given optimism lives in the future, and Bill and others are there's this really rosy outlook just over the hill. On predicated on that, we get to October or whatever, and Affordable Waters, as it's now being called, is full steam ahead, and so that makes our fiscal position look quite bright. Has there been any consideration given to smoothing the cost of rates through that period? So if we're going to have something of a windfall, if you like, that instead of making cuts, if we think it's pretty essential, that you can borrow against a rate increase. I know that's there's arguments for and against that, but given the optimistic outlook, if you had a pessimistic outlook, you wouldn't do it because you're just going to plunge yourself further into a hole. But given that we have this money that is likely to be coming back in, has any consideration given to a smoothing?
You mean borrowing against that?
Yep.
I don't think so. Yeah.
Thanks, Nigel. We discussed this during the long-term plan, and the advice that Mark provided us then was that wasn't best
You mean
practice.
the annual plan?
Sorry, the annual, yeah. That it wasn't good practice. It's like borrowing money to put gas in the car, and then having to figure out how you repay for it at the end of the day. So, but there's a slide there that talked about the financial strategy and that guiding us through. So we will be working to that. I think is the best way that I can answer that. It would have to be pretty dire, I think, for us to step away from the financial strategy and to do something that may have implications if we don't go one way with affordable water. Because if we don't, then we have to figure out how we pay for that through depreciation, which of course is rates funded. So, and I get a sense in the discussion about rates that we do have to be careful. And I think about where we started for this current financial year, we were at about 14%, and we were able to pull some levers, make some changes that allowed us to get that down to 7.8. Perhaps it should have been 10. In all honesty, thinking about it in hindsight, because it would have loaded some of the pain perhaps earlier, as opposed to thinking about. But we took a cautious approach, and we looked at how we could provide some relief. I'm noting that it is very challenging at the minute. and listening to the Reserve Bank Governor this morning, again saying that we are in recession and it will take a little bit longer than perhaps first considered for us to come out of that. So we have to be really prudent, and this is going to be the hard bit, is where we maintain a level of prudence whilst still being able to deliver services. So it's going to be a challenge for us, but it's not unique to us, you know. So there are 70 odd councils around the country who are all having these discussions. Some might loan fund. We're in a pretty good position where at the minute we haven't had to, and I'd like to hold true to that.
Who's next?
This question probably
Glenn.
follows on. It's probably the opposite of what Nigel was just asking, and it's probably something that may not be able to be answered right here. But we used to have the Green Line test. Now we've sort of got our upper limit of borrowing. Have we, in terms of the LTP with the Three Waters debt reducing? So once where that money comes in, our debt will reduce. How far away are we from knowing what our upper debt limits are post that payment? Does that make sense? That we can live with, and so that sort of dictates really what big infrastructure stuff we need to be looking at, doesn't it? I know it depends on the payment, but
Do you want to answer that?
I'll start and let's see how far I go. It's a good question. Some of it will come down to the revals as well. You know, every year we revalue our asset, which at the minute sits at around 1.7, 1.9 billion. You know, so and that gives us our lending ability. So if that reduces by 36%, there will have to be advice as to what the new ceiling looks like, noting that with the financial strategy, you can change the ceiling. I mean, Sean and I have talked about what does the ceiling look like. I think at the minute we're at 280%. You push that to 300%. You know, if you've got the appetite to do that, but with that comes a cost. You know. So I certainly haven't been given advice recently about what a new debt ceiling might look like. There would have to be revaluation for us to understand what that really means. So I'm happy for you to chip in on that.
We have some modelling done. Jing, our CFO, is enjoying a lovely ski holiday at the moment, but when she gets back, she'll be putting the finishing touches on what we know so far about how the Three Waters transition will affect our financial strategy. So she's doing all of that modelling now. As soon as as we think we've got something decent to share with you, we will come and talk to you about it, because that is going to give us staff the ranges within which we could comfortably do things without compromising our credit rating, our ability to borrow through LGFA at a decent rate. You know, all of those things are a balancing act, and that's why the financial strategy is so important and why it will have to lead us this time. So just to give you some comfort, we have done some modelling work. I believe we are sitting on some elements of it that we just simply have not settled yet. Like we say, the amount of debt and the timing of debt will make of whether we get that debt payment all at once or whether we get it, you know, fed to us in increments. It all depends. So suffice to say, we will need a whole workshop on that financial strategy.
Yep. How important is that work to be done before the LTP's sort of?
It's part of the LTP.
So it's part of.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's
Cool.
an early part of the LTP, because we want it to lead the conversations. If you think about, you know, we'll get together in a workshop setting, you'll fully understand what our financial headroom or envelope is, and then you'll be starting to talk about, well, what goes in, what comes out, what gets moved around, what changes do we want to make in the context of that.
Yep.
So it is a very early piece of work that
Awesome.
we need to get cracking on.
And just a comment, I really like the signals and the prudence and the I'm feeling from the team. So yes, very heartening, I think.
Great.
You've got an awesome
Thank you.
team there. Yeah.
Shelley?
Completely in a completely different direction. Has there been any thought to what we can do and invest to create income? And one of the things is we're going to get money back, so we're going to have less debt and the potential to be able to borrow and invest in the land we have out here and partner with Te Whatu Ora, education, business. We can build up close to the, like, what we're going to get any options of that? Because we actually need to have something that we can make money from. Any business person would be looking at this as an opportunity to create income. We've got no income. We need to have income. We've got a prime piece of land out there with nothing being done on it. I don't know. Is that an option that we can look at? It just seems we're all so doom and gloom, but we're not making any money. We need to make some money.
So we've set up we're setting up the vehicle by which something like that could happen. So, any other? I think it's a conversation for another day, Shelley.
Yeah, it's a good starter
It's a
though.
really good starter, yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Does Chris want to say something?
Yeah.
No.
So we look we have started the thinking, and actually you've been through some workshops looking at different vehicles, the affordable housing being one of them, housing for the elderly being another. Chris and I have also been talking about the vote budget as opposed to grants in central government, which is where the big money is. Martin talked about the policy coming out of the opposition and having $1 billion fund available. The Local Government Act constrains us a little bit in where we can be competitive. But there are some options. Mark de Haast has also been turning his mind to investment type funds, how we can grow a protected cell, which will also return something to us and also give us some headroom in insurance. Our insurance costs are huge, and we are probably all experiencing this in our own personal lives with the increase in insurance costs. So we are thinking. We have been challenging ourselves, and I know when I first arrived here, I did have some discussions about mechanisms, and so we are thinking harder about that now. Because you're right, we don't have a port, whether by air or sea. We don't own a lines company, so we don't get a dividend, which is really challenging. So 80-90% of our revenue comes from rates, and it is becoming harder and harder every year to work with that type of model.
And we'll never get that opportunity again.
That's right.
The opportunity is coming. And we're never going to reduce rates because we've got income.
Yep.
And that would form part of the financial strategy. So you'd see that.
We have
discussed
got
with me.
Lawrence online and we're live streaming, so just make sure you have your microphones on when you speak at all times. Sophie?
Yeah, just a couple of questions relating to the slide that we're on now. So in terms of the point around no increases to service levels, is that too premature to have as a principle before we've had the conversations, the coming conversations, to put that out right, before we've had the chance to kind of thrash out what's on the table? I'd personally like to see something a bit more open, like for example at the top, aiming for a low rate impact. Whereas if we say right now, one of the principles is that we're not going to increase levels of service before we've had the chance to talk through various pathways to achieving increased community wellbeing, I'd feel more comfortable to keep that more open. And just the other thing I would want to add is we've got the wellbeing of our people continuing to be a priority, the wellbeing of our people and environment as well in there too. Yeah.
Oh, there it is, Chris.
So I just wanted to make sure we've clarified. Cheryl was sharing with you the planning principles that SLT is working through to bring information back to you about, I'll say, our current state and opportunities before we get anywhere near any of the other things that we talked about today. So if we added it on top of this, some of the things that you're focused on, that would be important to do as well. So the points you're bringing up, Sophie, I think we would add on to, once we table this, the other things that you think we also need to be thinking about across that. So we're busy in the background pulling together an overview that will come to this table. I think that will be part of that conversation about us being able to say to you, we're essentially going, what do we have now? In terms of legislative change, what requirements are there? And if what we're delivering now isn't focused on the council priorities, what more would we need to do to deliver on those? That is what we're assessing to come back to us. So we've got those three areas. And then we talked about the community board input to that. We would be filtering that through that same kind of framework, so that when we then start to go, where are the trade-offs? So you've only got this much money and your list is this big, where does that get you? And I just did want to add to Shelley's point. Shelley, I know you're going to be excited. We have got a funding and revenue stream briefing in the diary, so that we can put a whole ton of ideas on the table with you and see what might stick to engage the community on.
Brilliant, thank you, Chris.
Oh, sorry, Sean's adding something?
Maybe because this is the public workshop, and that slide is, maybe we should make it clearer that this SLT's planning principles, this is not, council haven't agreed that this is basically your principles. We just wanted to give it that context before we bring those numbers or bring the information back to you. So maybe we should change the heading maybe.
Well, yeah.
I have to say, it's good to have these in front of us. I don't remember us being aware of the background to some of the decisions that were made before, and yeah, it's almost like we need these stuck to the table beside us for the next 10 months. But yeah, I mean, if we disagree with any of these principles at this point, though, I mean, isn't this the point to say so? Like, should there be an assumption that we don't increase service levels? Should, as Sophie had just questioned, is now the opportunity to feed back on these, or do you think we just see what washes up out of them, and then at that point we have the discussion?
Yeah. Certainly we would have no intention of coming back to you saying, yeah, we ditched that idea because that would mean a service level increase. Like, we wouldn't do that. We will be coming to you with some with a well-formed discussion around what's driving the increase and what the possible options might be.
I think just to add to that, Cheryl, I think the no increases to service levels was more about the work we're doing.
Yeah.
So sometimes what happens in organisations as you go, we can continually improve what we're doing, and we'll just do more of something. We want to bring that back to the table and say, here's where we're currently at. If we continue to do this, this is what it looks like. We'd also let you know if there was the opportunity to do more. But our starting principle was that we weren't going to encourage our staff to go off and go, let's add our own long wish list to things, given the context that we're operating in. So that's what's sat behind that idea. When we talk to you, we'll still have the conversation about, actually, are there areas that we do need to do more? And conceivably, I think someone else had said recently, and I won't quote, there may be areas where we want to do less. So I don't know. It might be the balance that we have of what's important and how does it align to the council priorities.
Liz?
Yeah, well, just following on from that, I'm assuming there's still a piece of work going on alongside this, as per what we discussed in the annual plan process, whereby we are making this organisation fit for purpose now, so that we're in, you know, a much better state come middle of next year, so we can hopefully we can squeeze some extra, you know, fat out of the system somehow, so that we've got a bit more room to move to align to those priorities and so on from mid next year. I know, Darren, you said you were doing some work on that, so can we work that into the process as well in terms of getting some feedback? Like, I know one of the sticking points in the annual plan was staff costs, for instance. Have we got our staffing aligned to those top 10 priorities? Just when I was just talking about, you know, what's happening in the climate and environment space. You know, we've had a key staff member move out of that area. You know, how is all that being aligned? And so it would be good at some point to get an update on how we are streamlining and, you know, creating a lean, mean machine to go into the next 3-year period.
Yep, spot on. So I have provided the Mayor and Deputy with an update, and there will be some work coming back in relation to productivity and what that means for us as an organisation. Lean and mean is good, but when someone in the lean and mean falls over, there's not a lot of fat to cover it. So I've got we as an executive have to balance that. So we have commenced the transformation program. We've just closed out the first part of that, which is receiving feedback from the teams to understand what they think fit for purpose looks like for us in the new organisation. So we are compiling that information, categorising it, summarising it, and then we will sit down as a collective and look at that and come up with a draft as to what our future might look like. And when I implement that, I will bring it back to you. But it's not something that I'll be discussing through the long-term plan or at this table. It is an operational decision, and you don't hear me say that very often. But this is about making sure that I fit our numbers into that financial envelope, and can still deliver what we need to deliver. And can I just reassure you, people come and go. One person doesn't change an organisation, and whilst that person might be a good person, if we can keep them in our organisation and grow and develop them through other roles, that's a really big win for me, because it's building the breadth of their ability, and we are attracting really good people into the organisation. That's something that I'm reminded of regularly, and how we have people ringing to discuss roles that we have advertised in the market. So we're not short of bringing good people into the organisation. Our reputation is on the up, and that's reflected with what we are seeing with people. The challenge, there's a bit of relativity challenge in meeting the demands of the market. You know, the expectation of salary is still quite high, even though we are in recessionary times. And the recent announcements from central government into what their ratification in some of those pay negotiations look like make it even harder for us. But we're attracting really good people, and I'm really confident. I've got a really good executive team, and come the new year, we will be fit for purpose.
Yeah, so it is operational, but Liz is fulfilling her governance role and checking in that it's underway and going well.
Yeah, it's not our area to delve into, but
Yeah, just a broad oversight. Martin.
Look, certainly agree with Liz and Glenn over there, but also with what we're hearing across the table around prudence and where we're going to be coming up. I just appreciate this is really challenging times. It's an interesting really because I appreciate we've got cost pressures, but one thing we don't have is income pressures. What I mean by that is our income doesn't go backwards. You know, that's part of this as well. There'll be a lot of businesses out there that's exactly what will happen and that sort of stuff. So at least we know a baseline of where we're going to be coming into the into our processes as such. To me, the big issue here is just a general uncertainty, and we're trying to hedge our bets to create certainty. But it's an uncertain environment, and we're not going to have any surety until after the elections on how this is going to shake down. I don't think we can make assumptions because, quite frankly, I don't think any of us knows what the heck's going to happen on the other side of this election. And we're not talking minor changes, we're talking significant changes which will heavily impact what we're doing as a long-term plan. So I'm really happy with what I'm seeing with the general the attitude, if you like, that comes out of what we're being presented. But you know, for me, I don't envy your job at all with regards to really hedging those scenarios until we've got that much more certainty. And even then, we don't even know. It's going to be better certainty, but not great certainty. You know what I mean? And that sort of stuff. So I'm holding off, really, getting too heavily into this until we see what the heck's shaking out in government. And I know your role is you've got to take all that into consideration. As such. I appreciate us keeping us informed. We have to front foot this. We can go out to our community boards and be looking at bringing that information in sooner so we know what we're dealing with and that sort of stuff, but appreciating that we have a current plan and it will be things that can potentially fit in that, or it might not be any of it because it just fiscally does not work and that sort of stuff. And we'll be happy to face those conversations if we're taken on that journey as well. So no, thank you very much.
Just as we can't pause our district plan work while we wait for the new RMA, we can't pause our long-term plan while we wait for an incoming government, can we?
No.
Nigel?
I'd like to get some advice for the workshop that Chris is talking about on a self-insurance model or even a hybrid of a self-insurance model. As Darren's just pointed out, our insurance costs are escalating, have been for quite a long time, and the poor old insurance companies, the top 20 of them, only have $11.2 trillion of assets, and they made $142 billion profit last year, so they're struggling, obviously. But I like to think I introduced a self-insurance model to Greater Wellington around flood protection, and it was a hybrid model. So if you would normally insure your assets for 100 million, we would insure them for 90 million, and the premium saved on that. It's a bit of a punt, but the premium saved on that was put aside till you get to a point where you are virtually self-insured. You're never probably going to get the whole way there, but it's a model I think really worth considering. So I'd like to get some advice on that, if that's, as long as it's not, you know, war and peace, just to see if that's possible in this organisation, because I know the imperatives at Greater Wellington were different than here in terms of those assets. And just Shelley's point about revenue streams, yeah, I really want to see us go down that track as much as we can, you know, without sort of, you know, shooting off to the TAB and putting it all on Bye Birdie and the Seventh at Trentham. There are probably some options between that and something that's more sort of workable. And thank you very much for that list. Some of those are probably in conflict with others on the same list, but the no increases to service levels, I would also like to see no decreases in service levels. That comes back to the staffing issue that Liz was raising. And every time you have, you know, a staff member down, that may impact on the ability to service, you know, levels of service. So
maintain existing service levels, maybe.
Well, and again, that gets tricky because, you know, Darren's probably going to come and tell us, here's the knives, start using them, you know. Yeah, but it's something that I think we should be considering as well.
Chris, did you have a comment to one of those points in there?
Sorry, just one. I just want to note, because I want to manage expectations here, that the proposition for an initial workshop around funding and revenue streams is to get your just a bunch of 101 ideas that we could be pursuing, and we would look to shortlist that list and then look at those and consider the viability, feasibility and doability of some of those things and what that looks like over time, so that we could actually put some reasonable options on the table for part of the discussion that would go out around the LTP. So we won't have completed the work by the time the LTP has obviously been consulted or goes live, but it would be our expectation that that was work that you were tasking us with over this triennium, so that we're establishing a more sustainable pathway for the district. If it's reasonable for me to say, that's one of the things that SLT has been talking about, is with all the changes that are happening, we know that we need to be supporting the district to look at how do we become self-sustainable, so that we're not reliant, as Darren said, with the majority of our income coming from rates. We know that that is not, that our current financial strategy with effectively debt grants and rates is not going to be affordable into the future or viable into the future. So we are going to be coming back to look through this training about what does it need to be and what are the arms of that financial strategy going forward.
It's one of the things we're going to do, find the person who won Lotto today.
Yeah.
And then we'll do to them what somebody's done here. Kathy, and then Kirsten, you have the final word.
Okay. Bullet point 6, the well-being of our people continues to be a priority. That can mean different things to people. But at this point in time, parents and young people are telling me that they need an indoor sports and recreation centre here. At the moment, we're out doing a feasibility study. So my feeling is we cannot be going out and asking feasibility studies, would you like an indoor sports and recreation centre? I know the answer is going to come back yes. And where do we go from there if you're saying there's no funding? I mean, hello, I'm just flagging it really, because it's about the well-being of our people, and they're saying this is what they need. And there's and with the feasibility study being out there and asking the people, surely to goodness we must have some funding and long-term plan for at least part of this. We just can't go out and say yes they want it and then we say sorry you can't have it.
It's a very timely pitch, Kathy. Well done. You got in first. Chris.
Well, I agree that is obviously on the list, Kathy. We know that's there. I just wanted to note, just to clarify, that the wellbeing of our people continues to be a priority. From SLT's perspective, we were talking about KCDC, i.e. council staff. So as that we were going through a change discussion and also bringing options to you, we were saying that part of what we were going to balance and coming back to you was that we are making sure that we do look after the people that also work for council. Acknowledging though that there's also the community, and we're very focused on that and the point you've raised, Kathy, but it was actually about the people here.
And that's why I said you can mean many things to many different people.
Great, Kirsten.
Oh, tēnā tātou. Good discussion today, helpful. My first question was to ask who you're referring to in those 2 bullet points where it says the well-being of our people and professional development of our people, because I would have assumed the well-being of our people was talking about everyone, not council staff. So yeah, let's be really clear who we're talking about in all of those things. And then my other, so that's answered already. My other question was about the last bullet point there. Where did that come from? did this group ask that they be put in there, or did someone else
No,
ask
no,
for
no,
that?
no, it was not ours.
Oh, this is a draft list and you've come for our input into this list, is it?
Mm.
Yeah, and so the real question is, what
The chief
support is
executive's
that
gonna-
referring to
The chief executive.
as it may impact on whether or not it should be standardised? Cool.
Look, this is a, this is the executives list for council, and so these are the things that we think about when we come into these. So if I look at the last one, cost of support, Tiwi. So what is that financial cost for us as a council? We currently have some agreements in place, so understanding, do those continue? Are they sufficient? What does that mean for us so that we can actually be partners and engage appropriately? Because it's easy to send you documents to review. I don't know, is that partnership or is that just a transaction? That's where my mind goes to. So it's about how we are to manage an enduring partnership and what that means for us. Noting that our mana whenua, our partners, are all at different stages in developing your own organisations.
I don't know what happened there. Okay, so you're just talking about that part of support to iwi. There's work streams.
I found the wording
and
a little
there's-
bit weird.
Yeah, support for governance work. So wanting to understand what that is and does that live here?
I think, Darren, we're referring to making sure that we don't forget to budget sufficient, like to have a good conversation about what is needed across the board. There's a few cost centres that we're looking at, that sort of thing, like legal costs, for instance, centralising those and really thinking those through a bit more robustly. So I think that was so that we didn't miss things. Probably poorly worded though. Slides all. A few issues.
Oh,
hasn't it?
it's just these are bullet points with a lot of further information that sits underneath them,
Definitely.
which wouldn't fit onto this slide. Is how I would summarise it. But yeah, it's the first time we've seen them, so we're naturally curious. Anything further, Kirsten?
Oh, just that, I guess, and it's just thinking out loud that there's over the last few years, it's probably half of you will be aware that Ngā Hapu Ōtaki has become quite involved in the council activities
Just
at
a
governance
little.
level, and then in a number of work streams. And in some of those work streams, there's been discussions about different initiatives, and we've been told, like, I don't know how many times, if you want to do something like that, you need to be involved in the LTP discussions right from the beginning in order to have an initiative like that agreed to and budgeted for. But the discussion today, there's a really strong sense that it would be difficult to bring in new initiatives. We might not be able to go down those sort of tracks, and I'm not sure that we're actually being invited to. I mean, aside from the discussions, the reaching out that Darren's done to us, I'm not sure that we will do it. We will be wanting to propose things and suggest them and talk about them. But if this is the range of the principles, it does feel like that'll be difficult unless we're taking from something else. Yeah.
And I think that is the reality, that we're absolutely going to want to add some stuff. We're not saying we're saying that there's no headroom to add it, but that doesn't mean to say that we can't make some trade-offs and have some tough discussions, to fit things. I'd like to be optimistic that way, that it's not doom and gloom.
Might be some reprioritising.
Yes,
I think that's what we're talking about.
Yes.
Ka pai.
The other
Reality
important
check.
the other important thing is to just keep an eye on those council priorities of ours, and if they're not aligning with some of your priorities, then definitely let us know, because they'll be used as a kind of decision making tool.
Cool. Thank you.
So I've just seen 3 lights go on, and we've got 3 minutes to go.
Just,
And
yeah,
Kirsten was meant to have the last word.
Real quick,
so,
just reply to Kirsten.
yeah, just
if you don't mind.
any comments from now on, really quick. I'm not going to
Um,
take 5 questions from anybody or anything like that.
Kia ora, Kirsten. Just to let you know, we have the community board, and Shelley has also been chatting with Kim and Denise regarding working with Ngā Hapa Otaki, particularly with the vision Otaki work as well, in terms of what do we want, Otaki to see in the next sort of 25 years, and so that will feed into LTP stuff as well. So that's another opportunity for both of us to work together towards getting, what Otaki should have in the future.
Yeah, working together. Shelley?
Well, me and Nigel want to build a casino. We've changed our mind. Casino doesn't ever be rolling in it.
We're so
Great
All
idea.
our money on black or red.
Jocelyn, a very, very quick comment.
Yeah, just the second bullet point, plan for low growth, less than or no more than 1% per annum. I think there needs to be some clarity.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
what we're
good
referring
question.
to there is we've got our growth projections that I believe have been brought to you previously. So we're aiming for the 50th percentile for population growth and household growth. But what we're referring to here is a somewhat tempered view of the level of consenting activity that we think that we can expect, so that we can get the expected revenue from our fees and charges around those two things a bit more correct than we have done in the past. It's always really hard to estimate how many consents we're going to process and what kind of revenue we'll be able to recover from those. So that's what that was alluding to.
Unfortunately, I'm not sure whether that satisfies my. Well, I suppose I understand what you're saying about planning for low growth, but actually the way potentially it might be controlled might be a question, if I
Yeah,
may
good.
say.
Good question.
Yep. Chris has a.
Sorry, I just maybe think to support that conversation. We, SLT had a conversation together about, obviously we are taking into account expected growth or projected growth, but also just want to remind you that when there's unexpected issues like COVID, and we assume that we're going to have stronger growth, or we push out with that growth and it doesn't occur, it effectively puts more pressure on our ability to deliver. And also, effectively, we end up coming back to you in annual plan check-ins going, oh no, that didn't quite land the way we thought it would, it's going to cost more. It ends up being or falling into rates increases. So we want to be more conservative in the way that we're pushing forward. It doesn't mean we're not being aspirational about those funding and revenue streams, but we're trying to say we're acknowledging that we're in the middle of what is being a slowdown period, and we're just going to be a little more conservative than we may have been last time with our expectations of how things would pick up. So we're not saying it won't happen. Not saying we won't support it. It's just we think we need to be or consider being conservative in the way that we are pushing forward in things like our long-term plan.
Thanks, Chris.
So we will talk to you about it, but we were trying to take a stance that we're not going to be aggressive in the way that we think about appetite in the space.
Thanks, Chris. We're going to wrap up there. I'll just do a little bit of my version of what's gone on today. So very quickly, a lot of uncertainty around Three Waters. So we're going to have a fact sheet around that. We had some discussion around what's our comms plan, particularly around communicating the cost pressures that we're under. We're going to have a discussion amongst the councillors about a wider context political lobbying, particularly in an election year, around the cost pressures that we're facing. We're going to have a briefing soon about some other alternative funding models, which sounds like it's going to be much more fun than the long-term plan discussions. Where early on in the discussion we had quite a lot of discussion around how the community inputs early into the long-term plan, and the community board's input and iwi input. We're not afraid of culling down a long list. We want our community to have every opportunity to have early input into our long-term plan. But the main thing is we're operating under an extremely tight financial outlook with high uncertainty, and we're going to be led by our financial strategy, which will come back to us soon. Does that about sum it up? Cool. Thank you so much. Oh, and we're going to build a casino, and we're going to find the person who won $37 million. So, any last statements by Cheryl? Would you like to finish off with anything?
Yeah,
We're just going to finish off. 2 more seconds.
I'd just like to thank you all for being here today. And this is my first LTP workshop with this council. I've done lots with other councils, but it's an absolute pleasure to be here and great conversations around the table. Looking forward to working with you on our next fantastic LTP.
Likewise.
Thanks for coming. And if you need any chat about what to expect from this LTP, let me know.
Ngā mihi nui. Ka kite.